There we go. What a screw up today. Boy, oh boy. I came down here early to get the show prepped, and I forgot a couple of things. I forgot to A, schedule the show, which is why most of you didn't get notifications yet. And B, I forgot my microphone. So here we go. We're getting a late start, or an early start, but a bad kickoff. Anyway, let's get right to it. I want to jump in and give you a quick little overview of where we are before I start the actual show, but it's going to be a recorded interview today. I've got an interview that I did with somebody from NCPG, which I think you're going to like a lot. So, with that said, here we go. No sound, really? Is there sound now? There should be sound. I think you got it. I think there's sound now. Just confirm that for me in chat if you would. I'll keep talking as though there are sound. But let's get at it here. So on the coffee run today, a couple of quick things. One is going to be, I have to ask, you ready for some football? Football that matters now. Finally got some playoff action. Couple of good games out there for sure this weekend. I'll tell you what, the one, I know DGen and Ian had a really good show the other night, except for the echo, about this. One of the shows I'm looking forward, or the shows, one of the games I'm looking forward to most, two of them actually, are selfishly in my wheelhouse, three of them. One is going to be the Dallas Green Bay game. I know the whole world's betting on Dallas on this one. I think Green Bay is going to sneak up. And I hate Dallas, right? But I think Green Bay is sneaky, and I think they're going to take Dallas down in this one. I'm also really curious to watch that KC Miami game. The weather's going to be an enormous factor in that game, and I think it can be said that that's in KC's favor, but I think the weather's going to be so extreme that it's going to be an equalizer. And I wonder if the speed of Miami's receivers, knowing where they're going and having the DBs have to adjust on a slick field, is going to be a disaster, right? I actually like Miami in that game. I'll pick the dog in that game. I know I'm crazy. This is why I finished last place in the Pick'em League, but I have my reasons. And of course, the Eagles-Bucks game, I don't even know what to think about that one. Of course, I'm an Eagles fan, so I'll watch it with great intent, but I don't have high hopes for the Eagles there. And in fact, it's one of those games where it's better if they don't win, because that team needs to do some soul searching. So I think if they lose it, probably the best thing for the team to not win one and then get destroyed next week by whoever else is next. Anyway, there's my football thoughts. The Daily Paycheck, quick recap of the Daily Paycheck. We recovered $15 from yesterday's ass kicking. Yesterday we lost $900. Today I won $15. Short session today. I went short stack. I tried to stick to 5 units. I was going to talk more about that on this show, but a couple of things happened that were interesting today. One is on one of my rolls, I hit the repeater bet on 3 numbers in one of the rolls, which was great. Didn't hit the ATS, but I rocked out 3 repeaters, which is better than the ATS. We also got whacked for 6 DC bets with odds, got whacked, and I still made a profit. Right? That strategy, I know $15 is kind of a laugh riot, but that son of a gun is stable. I mean, you get picked off for 2 lay 4s, $400 in lay 4 action, 3 times we got picked off for $65 on the 6, and once got picked off for $100 on the 5, and we still made $15 on 3 shooters. So that's a stout son of a gun. There it is. I think, and anyway, I want to talk to you Monday. After the rollout, we'll talk Monday about bet sizing. I had a nice conversation with JB yesterday, back and forth about bet sizing and where I should be stop loss wise, bet sizing wise. I'm going to work the weekend on some win crap stinks to kind of vet out some ideas, and I'll present them to you Monday as part of the odds maker conversation. So that's that. And then really moving forward today, we're just going to get right to it. I had a guest today who's going to talk to us about I'm going to switch right to it, about problem gambling. We met with Gargoyle earlier, and he told his story, right, of having a gambling problem and kind of how he worked through it and sort of overcame it, right, and to where he is today, where he's stable and healthy. That's not everybody's story, though, right? A lot of people don't have a recovery story. A lot of people have a different story to tell, and the problems can be a lot worse. Well, yesterday I got a chance to talk to a guy named Keith White, who is the executive director of the NCPG, on the inside of 1-800-GAMBLING and the chat lines and the direct service help. And I got to ask him a ton of questions, and he's such a wealth of information. He couldn't be with us live, so I recorded it. I'm going to play the recording for you right now. I'll jump with you in chat, but I want you to take the time here. And as he's talking, take your notes, get questions formulated. He will take questions from us over email. So if you've got questions you want to know, you want to forward them to me, I can forward them to him, or whatever. You can probably get to them. Not sure you can get to him directly from the website, but yeah, I can be your conduit there. Anyway, here's the interview I did with Keith White from NCPG. Give me a second to get that started for you. Where is it? There it is. All right, everybody. We are here with Keith White, Executive Director of NCPG, the National Council on Problem Gambling. Keith, welcome and thanks for your time.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, John.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. We, as you may know, we did a fundraiser a couple of years back. My first year ever on YouTube, actually. We did a fundraiser, and I had this goofy idea to do like, hey, let's do like Jerry Lewis. Let's go 24 hours. And I did it. I sat in this chair in this room for 24 hours and interviewed people. And everybody, interestingly enough, I want to interview a bunch of gamblers because that's what I do. I do a craps podcast, obviously. And I wanted to get their, like, okay, what is your experience with problem? Do you know somebody who has a problem? Have you had a problem? And they all shared family members, and it was interesting to get their stories as well as sort of their ideas on gameplay. Raised a little bit of money, got some awareness raised. But as you've said to me privately, it's like, it's weird, like split, right? I have a podcast on gambling. I teach craps, yet raising money and awareness for problem gambling. And I'd like to get your thoughts in general on just what is problem gambling? How would you describe it?
Well, thanks again for having me, John. I think it's really important to be able to talk to everybody on all spectrums of this issue. And of course, you reach a ton of people who play. And so those are folks that it's great to talk about both what is a gambling problem, and then more importantly, how to prevent, warning signs and things like that. So a gambling problem for us, there's a couple ways to define it, but I think in layman's terms, it's gambling that's causing problems in your life. And for everybody, it starts out recreationally. And for the vast majority of Americans, 95% of Americans who gamble don't have a gambling problem in this year and will never have a gambling problem. So when you start to break it down, well, what does it mean when it's causing a problem in your life? That's when gambling is disrupting family, vocational pursuits, or your own kind of well-being. It's not just about losing money, but it is losing money is one of the consequences. So we can talk about that a little bit further, but I think it's important to set that stage, and also say it's on a continuum, and it changes. It can change over time. So what was once recreational may become problematic, or what was once problematic, you may be able to get yourself into a more healthy relationship with gambling and not be at risk.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, you see the warning signs here on the screen.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because when I hear you say that, the word compulsion comes to mind to some degree. And I've had somebody a good friend of mine who actually suffers from alcoholism, and has said, there's a chemical component to that. There's a part of it that's chemical, and I think with gambling, there's a different chemical that may be involved. But some people, I think, make a choice. Like you're saying, things can go wrong in your life, and you turn to this, and then it becomes, I think they look at it as a tool almost, and then it becomes compulsive. Is there a difference between those two types of folks that have a problem? Somebody who's more predisposed to being an addict, and somebody who turned to this and then becomes compulsed with it. Is that making sense, that question?
Absolutely. No, it's a great question, because you're right. Much of your risk is driven by your biology, your heredity. And it is the same neural pathway. It's the same dopamine system in your brain that is implicated in all the substance addictions and gambling. So even though there's no substance, gambling, people with severe gambling problems have similar changes in their brain as someone with a severe cocaine addiction or severe alcohol addiction. So there's a lot of commonality there. And so roughly anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of your risk for addiction is driven by genetic factors. And then 1/3 to 2/3 is driven by environment and the way you approach things. So there's a lot of overlap. And then you're right. Addiction is often defined as a coping mechanism. It's not a good coping mechanism, but it's a coping mechanism because most people with gambling problems or alcohol or drug problems may be using it to flee or escape or anesthetize problems they're having in other areas of their lives. And then, of course, that addiction adds to those problems and makes everything even worse.
Yeah, I know that folks who have substance abuse problems will say things like there's they will drink or do drugs, whatever it is, to get to a baseline at some point, right? It's like I got to get to like where I feel okay.
Yes.
Different in gambling. There is no like I got to do this so I can feel okay. I feel like it's a tool to some degree. They're seeing it as a tool, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there are some people who don't feel good unless they have money at risk. They don't feel good if they're not in action. I think many of your viewers may identify that. But what separates recreational, even heavy recreational players like you from people with problems is that you can turn it off. You don't have to be. You don't feel uneasy if you're not playing craps. You have other pursuits. You have other things. I mean, yes, it's a big part of your life, but it's not the only part of your life. And it's not a thing where if you go on vacation for a couple of days and you're not at a craps table, you're not shaking. We know people with gambling problems who literally, when they're not gambling or they're trying to stop, they can get withdrawal, actual physical withdrawal.
Like a physical symptom. No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And the thing that's different about gambling than the other addictions is that there's no amount of money is the substance that people with gambling problems abuse, if you will. And there's not enough money in the world to overdose somebody with a gambling problem because our bodies over tens of thousands of years have developed physical defenses. If you drink too much alcohol, you pass out. That's your body's way of saying, hey, you've had too much to drink. You can't give a problem gambler enough money or enough action for them to stop.
Wow.
It's sort of an infinite. And so that's one of the things it's interesting to explore. If you had enough money in the world, you could keep gambling forever. And some of our folks will try that, but most people like you don't. And a large part of what you teach is really part of that responsible gambling. How to protect yourself, how to set limits, how to educate yourself so you can maximize your benefit, your enjoyment, but also minimize losses and minimize harm.
Sure. Well, I've got the warning signs up here on screen, obviously, and I think one of the questions that I've got is kind of on that level, which is the warning signs themselves. To somebody who doesn't have that issue, to me, they seem pretty obvious, right? It's like, okay, I mean, I think about gambling 24/7 because I have a show to run. But that's different, right? I'm looking for content. I look though at the need to bet more money or more often, or I don't get irritable. To me, that seems obvious. But somebody who's in the moments or the throes of it, these signs aren't obvious. So my question is really about self-identification. Do people recognize the signs on their own? And if not, surely their friends and family do. And how does that happen? Because if I'm looking at somebody who's close to me that I think has got a problem, my instinct is to say, we need to have a little talk here. But that's a super uncomfortable conversation to have.
Oh.
We should have a conversation. And how does somebody A, self-identify, and B, if not, what do you recommend for somebody to say to start the conversation off and start getting down the treatment path?
No, that's absolutely a great question. And so the two things, one, roughly 30% of the 200 and almost 300, so-called 300,000 calls, texts, or chats to our national helpline to 800 Gambler last year, roughly 30% of those were from loved ones of problem gamblers.
How many
because
calls?
So often, like you said,
how many calls was that again? No, the total.
Almost 300. Yeah, almost 300,000. It was 284,000.
Jeez. Yeah. Okay.
So
wow.
It's like one contact every 90 seconds, I think, if you average it out.
Okay.
And not all those are people with gambling problems. And like I said, roughly 30% are loved ones because the gambler is often they're in action. They're one bet away from winning everything back. Maybe they believe that what they're doing that they're going to gut it out until they win. They're chasing their losses. So it's really hard for someone that's in the depths of a problem to take a step outside themselves and recognize that what they've been doing recreationally for maybe 20 years somehow tipped into a problem. So it is hard if you do step back, and if you the self-test is helpful But context is important. That's why we would say with that self-test, with those warning signs, you really want to, if you think you may have a problem, talk to a professional. Talk to somebody who's certified in gambling, because like you said, and it's really important, context is everything. And so when you say you often think about gambling, you often gamble till your last dollar's gone. Well, for some people, that means you often gamble till your last dollar's gone because you play in a freeze-out tournament, or because the last dollar's gone means to you your budget, not all your spending money. And so again, context with these questions is really, really important. But what it comes down to, I think, what I tell people all the time is, are you gambling, or what, how and why you gamble? So are you gambling because you're enjoying it and it's not causing you problems? Are you gambling because you have to and it is causing problems? And so, and if you can get up and walk away, if you're not meeting some of these criteria, you're probably in a good place. And then, so you're right, the pathway to get help, that conversation with a loved one, a family friend, is incredibly hard. But it's a lot like talking to someone who has another problem. The main thing is to let them know you care about them. That's why you're having that conversation. And if they shut you down or they stop or they disagree, that's on them. At least you've done your part to say, look, I care. I think you should maybe talk to someone, but you can't make them. And that's the hard part of this or any other addiction.
Sure.
They have to accept that they've got a problem before they get help.
And that conversation's different, I think, if you're a friend or a spouse. Like as a friend to a friend, I can say, hey, I think we should talk. I care about you. I'm seeing problem signs. We should probably talk. Spouse is saying, this is impacting us. And it's beyond just, I care about you. It's like, hey, we have a problem now because of what's going on. And that conversation might be a different one. Would you agree that you approach those from different? So for folks who are maybe in that situation, what do those conversations look like? At what point does a spouse make the phone call on behalf of their loved one? As you said, part of the calls are that.
Often the call from the loved one is right when they're at the breaking point. They've tried to have all the soft conversations. They've set up separate bank accounts, but it's the gambler is still gambling. And so they will call us and say, how, your question exactly, how can I make that? How can I help them see that we don't have a college fund anymore, that our house has been mortgaged 4 times, blah, blah, blah. And so there's a couple things. There's a book for loved ones of problem gamblers. It's free on our website. It's called Financial Issues for Loved Ones of Problem Gamblers. Oh. And there's some information in there, that can range all the way from a soft conversation to an intervention. People there, you can hire a professional, come in and do an intervention to try and get someone with severe problem in treatment. But by and large, it starts with, I care about you. Here's the things that I'm witnessing, and here's what, I think we need to do. Most people with gambling problems that's a moment of clarity for them. And they'll say, yeah, you're right. Maybe I need to make some changes in my life, with or without professional help. But that's always the next step. I think it's important to say, John, yes, I care about you. And then here's some resources, to give them something to then do. And there's a lot of different options. And nowadays, obviously, we're online now. There's a lot of information you can access free and confidentially through the internet. Because a lot of people with gambling, they feel like they're going to be judged and shamed and stigmatized. There may be legal repercussions. They may, at the point where someone has the conversation with them, not always, but sometimes there's been, theft, fraud, embezzlement. Because again, if money is the substance that problem gamblers get high on, often you may borrow, quote unquote, borrow some money because you're due to win and you're going to pay it all back with interest. But obviously, most people with gambling problems don't have the kind of control to stop and pay it back. They keep on going and going because it's the action they stay into. So so on our website, you've got here on the screen, there's a lot of resources. It's free, it's confidential, and it's 24/7. Because there's a lot of different pathways into a problem, as we've said, but most importantly, there's a lot of different pathways out of the problem too. Our most important message is that there's hope and help available, and it's never too late. It's never a one-way street. I don't care how much money you've lost, how bad it is, how much preoccupation, compulsion you have. There are people out there who've been exactly in your shoes and can help you get to a healthier relationship on the other side.
One thing I saw on the website, and I want to have you guide me somewhere else, but I want to show folks the self-assessment,
Yeah, this is
which is I think probably step one. And you'll come through here, and there's a series of questions that you can go through, only 10 questions, and it'll give you kind of at the end of that, it'll give you kind of a where do you stand sort of a thing. Where is the book you were talking about just now? Where can I find that?
So underneath, it should be under resources. So if you tab down a little bit, um,
As far as
so
I
it's
can
so
go
funny.
there.
We just relaunched our website in the new year, and
Maybe it's at
I'm
the bottom.
still
Maybe it's down here.
I am still learning where all of our stuff is. I
Let's see.
apologize that I
No worries, no
can't.
worries. Let's find it together. I
Yes, find
see
it together. Yeah. So and it
treatment,
may
peer
not.
support
The,
sources.
Yeah, try peer support. So Gamblers Anonymous is a really good option
Mm-hmm.
because the
Yep.
biggest thing that you're going to hear when you walk in that room, most people with gambling problems will say, "I didn't think anybody processed gambling the same way I did. I don't think anybody's done the things I've done or thinks about it the same way I do." You walk into one of those rooms, and I guarantee you, there will be people there who think about gambling the exact same way you've done it. You know, they've done everything you've
Mm-hmm.
done and worse. Almost every person in recovery I've talked to says the first time they walked in that room, they thought they were not special but unique. They thought no one else could possibly have this crazy thing that I don't understand. And when you walk into that room and you see a circle of men and women sitting around there who literally um, feel and think and have had those exact same thoughts, it can be transformational.
Oh, for
You know,
sure.
it's that light bulb moment. It's amazing. Just like people on your show, you know, when they find someone else who knows craps and loves craps and understand it, you know, I mean, it's probably not the depth of that emotion, but like multiply that by 100, and you'll get that sense of relief that someone else understands what you're going through, or someone else understands, you know, some of the pain that you may feel, and
For
can help
sure.
you not feel pain.
I think the key word I got to highlight here is fellowship. Like that's a big thing. Like you're making that statement so beautifully, which is you go into a room with other people who you didn't think there was anybody else like you, and for sure there are, and they're walking through the journey at different levels. And you've got for debtors, for gamblers, for relatives. It's interesting. What is there a profile? Is there a profile that you think sort of fits?
It's interesting. So, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. So, you and I share one of the biggest risk factors, which is that we are men. And not only so, there's some biological predisposition. Men tend to be higher risk takers, but that's also how we've been socialized. I think that's it's the American spirit. I think risk taking is good. I think it makes us great businessmen and entrepreneurs and warriors and you know gamblers. But we've also had this long moral condemnation of gamblers in our history. You know, mainly religious, but religious, moral,
Mm.
and so it's always been uncomfortable a little bit to talk openly about gambling, which is why I'm so glad to be here to have that open and honest conversation about the benefits and the costs. You know, we're balancing it. This is a normative activity, and for most people, it's a recreational activity. So let's just talk about it like we would any other thing. But we don't. So men are less likely. Men are more likely to have gambling problems. They're less likely to seek help because we're guys. We gut it out. You know, we don't go to the
Hmm.
doctor unless we have to. That kind of thing. But there's a couple other things. Age is correlated. The younger you are, the more likely you are to have a problem. We see this especially with sports betting. Not so much with craps and
Mm.
table games players, but if you have viewers who are gambling on lots of different verticals, age starts to become predictive, but mainly in sports betting. Um, Table game players tend to skew older, tend to skew higher income. But then you look at things like military service. So people who are attracted to go into the military are probably more likely to take risks and thus more likely to have gambling problems. But they also, once you come out of the military, you've experienced a lot of stress, probably depression, and you know maybe combat trauma. All those things are associated with the gambling problem. So there's just two quick kind of demographic risk factors. But there's a lot we don't know, and there's a lot that's changing as gambling changes,
Hmm.
especially with online availability. That many of these risk factors are changing as well.
Has that changed things? I'm glad you brought that up because the online thing, it used to be, I'm from New Jersey originally. So, in Atlantic City
Yeah,
was you had to drive a couple hours there. You have
yeah,
to make, like, it's work to get to a casino. Really, it is. Now it's not work at all. For most people, you can just pick up your phone and off you go, right? And drinking and also destination, you have to go get it somehow, right?
Yes.
Now it's like just literally right here in your pocket, and you can drop a credit card on there or somebody else's credit card on there, and off you go. Have you noticed any kind of a spike or change in the recent years because of that?
There's been roughly a 30% increase in risk for gambling problems between 2018 and 2021. And the vast majority of that new risk is coming from young male online sports bettors. So the
Hmm.
online part of that is significant. There's something about sports that's a little bit different. There's something about, again, youth, men, but the online part is a big part of that risk. I will say that technology, though, is value neutral. And a lot of it comes down to how and why you gamble or how and why you use that technology. So if you're using your phone and you're setting limits and you're tracking your bets and you're setting warnings, hey, I only want to spend 3 hours today. Your timer goes off and you get up and you walk away. That's those can be protective factors. But of course, there's some additional risk factors. That one-to-one relationship you have with your phone, the 24-hour access, the amount of information that the gambling operator has on you is
Mm.
overwhelming. And we're soon, if not already, in the area of personalized messaging and targeting. So you're going to get a different ad than I will from the same company.
Right.
They're going to see you like crazy. So and those they're going to very soon AI is going to deliver an appeal that you can't resist because it's perfectly tailored and targeted
Totally.
specifically to you. And then the more you engage with it, the more they learn and the more they can target. So there's an arms race, if you will, or there's a
Hmm.
balancing act of technology. But right now it's heavily weighted in the favor of the gambling operators.
Well,
Um,
you're
you know,
speaking my language there. I actually, it's my old day job was I worked for a company who we made websites for car dealers. That was our thing.
hmm.
And a big part of that was in targeting the whole website would change based on your persona. So
Oh,
we spent
interesting.
years on this technology. This is before real AI came to be. But if you searched for a car and you were in, we could tell where you were from, a lower income area. We would show you fuel mileage. We'd show you the monthly payment. We'd show you muted colors, right? Trying to get you into where we thought you were. If you were searching for
Yep.
a car from a more higher income area, you'd see the horsepower, you'd see the red cars, you'd see the full price. And those little tricks that get the
Yeah.
buyer into the mood, right? AI is so much more advanced. Like this, it got advanced. And I fear for what you're saying, which is, a tailored experience is always nice,
Yes.
but a tailored experience is never designed to be nice. It's designed to generate income. And in a gambling website, generating income means taking your money in ways that seem very easy and comfortable for you. And I think that's where that's going to head. Little bit worrisome, I
It is.
hadn't put two and two together with the young people and the sports betting. I'm glad you brought that up because I know a lot of people who are in that younger demographic that do bet sports. And I think they're connected to it in a different way than us older folks are. I love
Mhm.
sports, but I don't think I can do it anymore. I think you're still in that age where you think like you got it, you understand, you're on the same wavelength as the guys
Yeah.
playing it, and you have it beat. Very interesting. Yeah, the sports betting thing. I've never been. When I was in Jersey, we weren't allowed to do it. There was no
Yeah.
sports
Oh
betting in
yeah.
Jersey at the time, so I never got into it. I never learned how to do it, so that whole thing escaped me. But I can see where that would be a different level. Do you find that demographics aside, a certain type of gambler seems to be more predisposed to be having a problem? Is it? And who is that?
Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the other things that's interesting about sports is that the way we bet sports now is fundamentally different than it's almost a different product than it was 15, 20, 30 years ago, right? So now, when we grew up, you and I, and we're of an age, you bet on the outcome of the game, and you maybe bet a couple days before on Tuesday, you put down your bets on the Sunday football games, right? For this generation, that is, they can't imagine waiting that long, so they bet now in play. They're betting on events within in the again the technology is coming together where you have hundreds of bettable propositions within each play. Whether or not there will be a touchdown on this play, 50 to 1. Whether or not there will be a run versus a pass, You can chain
Hmm.
together. It can be fantasy. It doesn't even have to be based on any reality. So there are we're at a point now within football where there's potentially hundreds of bets. You wouldn't Most sites aren't going to offer you that, but as the time lag decreases, as the technology improves, and again, you can potentially bet on anything that is measured and monitored can be monetized into a bet, and
Mm.
everything is measured and monitored now. It's not it. We in golf we see you can bet on distance to the pin of every single shot of every single player on every single hole in every PGA tournament. You can club head speed. How soon you're going to on hockey. You can measure how much force a player hits another player, and because that's tracked through their wearables. If it's tracked, you can make it into a market, and so
Seriously.
so that's it's divorcing itself from skill. Sports betting,
Yeah.
like probably your craps players, there's skill involved, right? You can
Hmm.
never overcome chance, but skill will help minimize that house edge. Most of this modern sports betting is now akin to slot machine because there's data out there. In fact, there's almost too much data, but you're really making decisions. If you're making decisions on whether or not there's going to be a pass or a throw on this particular play, you've got 20 seconds between downs, and then you've maybe got 10 seconds to put that bet in. That's pure chance, right? That's pure randomness.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little bit of skill involved, but and that's okay if you want to bet that and you're betting within your limits and all that. I mean, it's a fool's bet, but that's fine. But that's where that but people that's what's getting a lot of these young kids hung up. To your point, John. Sorry, to your
Mm.
point, many of these kids grow up thinking, or these kids nowadays think that what they're doing is betting sports because they've got more data than there's ever been in the history of the world. It's all at their
Hmm.
fingertips. But most of that data is not going to help them really overcome that house edge. It's illusory almost, and so the sports books are kind of putting out these propositions that are really poorly priced and are disadvantageous to the better. I mean, the hold on parlays is crazy. And I
Hmm.
suspect a lot of your viewers think very much about the household and these various bets. Well, most of the sports bets right now, the holds are 25% and above. But that's what this young generation bets. The 75% of the bets now are in play. Parlays are taking over. Parlays are the worst odds you can get. Some of those parlay odds are way above 50%,
Hmm.
and they're getting slaughtered.
That's
Anyway, sorry,
that's
it was a
no, that's
yeah.
very it's super interesting. Wow. So going, well, I want to wind back a little bit because we talked about some of the resources. We talked about, again, some of the warning signs that are out there. What I want to know is the treatment. So let's say you've identified the warning signs yourself or a family member, and you're something in here has gone, okay, I'm out of control, or I'm
Yeah.
I'm gambling, and my favorite thing, despite knowing better, I'm making a poor choice, which I think is like, okay, I know this is wrong, I'm going to do it anyway. And that
Yeah.
should be like your own personal aha moment. Somebody goes and raises their hand, hey, it's time for me. Or my wife and I have talked about it. It's time for us to go to Gamblers Anonymous and Gambit on. What does it look like? What does the treatment path look like for somebody who's going through this in general? I mean, is there a time window, or is this kind of an ongoing forever thing, or how does it typically? I mean, I know there's no typical person, but as typical as you can think about it, what is it? What does the process look like?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a lot of it depends on what pathway is most appropriate for you. So if some of it depends on the severity of a problem. If you're someone who is just starting to think I may have a problem, you may need brief intervention, kind of online stuff. Maybe you talk to a therapist a few times. GA is probably not for you. GA is
Mm,
probably for people that have more severe problems. Some of it depends on, frankly, sadly, in the United States, what insurance you have, whether or not they're going to
mm,
cover it. A lot of it depends on what state you live in. So there are almost 40 states now that provide public funding for problem gambling treatment. So that means
really?
if you live in DC, Texas, Hawaii, just among three states, there is no public funding for you to get help for your gambling problem. So there's a lot of variables, but by and large, it comes down to you're gonna face two major pathways. One is kind of therapy, counseling, professional treatment, someone that's been trained in this, like a drug or alcohol abuse counselor or mental health counselor. The other path is self help groups. And the only important thing to think about, and I should say here, if you call, text, or chat to 800 Gambler, we can help walk you through those choices, get you to then the resources you need. So you're not left on your own to try and figure out what path is right for you. So if you talk to a therapist, just make sure they know something about gambling. So many people with problems go try and seek help. They talk to someone who's an addictions counselor, but who doesn't know the nuances of gambling, and they leave because while there are a lot of similarities with drugs and alcohol, there's a lot of differences with gambling too. Self-help groups, if you go to some place like Gamblers Anonymous, it's free, it's non-judgmental, it's not religious based. It is just a fellowship of people dedicated to helping others. And so it may take a while to find the right room. Rooms are very different. They take on the personalities of their members. In New Jersey, where you're from, has a lot of different Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Some are women only. Some are more explicitly religious. Some are more explicitly, like say, Jewish or African American. So through our website, you can get links to places like Gamblers Anonymous, and they've got an international service office. But by and large, it starts with, if you think you have a problem, talk to a professional. Do the self-test on our website. But if you're committed to getting help, almost 2/3 of people who go to therapy or go to GA will reduce or have quit gambling by the time you follow up. So the success rate is great. There's a lot of dropout. There's a lot of people that don't stick with it. But if you are truly committed, roughly 2/3 of people who say, you come in, I really want to get help. I'm not just lying. I'm not just trying to tell the judge. I'm not doing it for my spouse. I'm doing it for myself. If you really want to make that change, your chances of quitting are much better than quitting smoking. And that's
okay.
That's good.
I quit smoking. That was hard. I can tell you that. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Question before I dive into my next question, I want to show this on screen. Here is your website again. At the bottom of the website, there's a list of all the resources by state. You did mention that not every state has this. Is that correlated to states that have legalized gambling? Is that sort of the thing where you see, if we have legalized gambling, there's going to be help for you? If not, then not. Or is it just kind of random by state? Is there a...
It's mostly correlated. So, when I started in this field back in 1995, there was less than a dozen states that provided public funding. So now we're up to 42, I think. So that's been a great improvement. It usually correlates with gambling availability. So, for example, but Nevada is often an outlier. They only started publicly funding problem gambling programs in 2005. Texas obviously has a ton of legalized gambling, but no public funding. So it's our goal is even for Hawaii and Utah, where they don't have legalized gambling at all, they still have people who gamble. They still have people with gambling problems. Sure. It would be like saying, well, drugs aren't legal in the United States, so we don't have any drug problems because it's illegal. That's where Hawaii and Utah are. They're turning a blind eye to this. But we'll keep pushing. There's also private resources. Gamblers Anonymous is everywhere, even though they don't get any state funding. So there's a not to get too deep into it, John, because it's a great. There's a lot of stuff out there, but it can be hard to find. So we try and make our website a hub, one-stop shopping for you to help get the help that you need. But it's there if you're sincerely interested in finding it. One of my friends in Gamblers Anonymous will say, if you were willing to drive 4 hours to the casino, you should be willing to drive 4 hours to see a therapist. And I thought, that makes sense.
It does. It totally makes sense. All right. So my last question is this then. So that's really, it's such amazing insight into everything. You mentioned that people during the treatment process will either opt out of it or not graduate, or sometimes they'll stay in it forever. Can you get better? Like, in other words, if I maybe have a warning sign or 2 or 3, or it's getting out of control, and I say, you know what, this ain't right, I'm going to go get some help, therapy, whatever it's going to be. Can I come out of that and become a healthy gambler again? Or is it the kind of thing where you are recommending, or maybe would say, no, if you have that switch that can turn on or off, never turn it back on again?
That's one of the greatest questions. There's a lot of different opinions out there. Because I'm neither a clinician or a person in recovery, I can say from the National Council's perspective, some people definitely want to go abstinence only. If they've got a problem, like you said, that it's, if they ever go back, they're gonna get into problems. But I know that there are people who absolutely can do a harm reduction path, and say that, and these are people who tend to have less severe problems. They're less biologically predisposed. Maybe that, they had, they started to have gambling problems because of their ways of thinking or their environment. Maybe, and so those are factors that can be pretty easily changed. And so, yeah, there are people that have success with harm reduction. The more severe your problem, the more likely you are to need abstinence rather than harm reduction. But at the earlier stages, and that's the goal, right? Is to, if they start to think they may have a problem, you can change a few things. And yes, you can still go on an annual vacation. You can go on a cruise ship where there's a casino and maybe your family members there, and maybe even sit down, maybe, that's, you're still at risk, but you're at much lesser risk. But it's a really important question because there's a lot of people that get turned off from seeking treatment because they think as soon as I say I have a problem, I'll never be able to gamble again in my whole entire life, ever. And if you don't really have a severe problem and you're really able to make that character change, then that's not true. But if you're committing fraud and illegal acts and you've lost your house and life and all that, probably abstinence is a good choice. And then, and I think the thing that's interesting between the start of treatment and then midway through or at the end of treatment, there's a lot of people who start out and say, I'm just doing this to stop the pain. And then they get a little bit into it and they say, you know what? Gambling was so unhealthy for me that I do want to actually now permanently stop. Because when you're at the start of treatment, you're still way in your head. It's all still swirling around there. You're probably not making informed decisions. Wait till you're 30 days in, 60 days in, a couple years in. And then when you're in a healthy state, a cold state of mind, and I'm sure you talk about this a lot, if you get on a heater, you're probably not making advantageous decisions unless you're really sticking to that same discipline.
That's right.
And so for people, for thinking about a thing like whether or not you're ever going to gamble again, you can't do it in the first day. But, in that cold state, and that's a good place also to set limits. And I'm sure you guys talk about this too. You don't make decisions about your next gambling move. When you're 13 rolls into on a streak, you do it before you start, and then then the discipline is to stay with it, or to change when you need to change to adapt your strategy, but not to just throw the whole thing out and say,
sure.
Yeah. So I think there's analogies in everything you teach. To also thinking about that the ways you can think about managing your gambling.
Yeah, and there's for me personally, there's a half worry and a half. Again, I don't, as not being a person that has a problem, it's hard to get my head wrapped around it, right? And so I look at it and go, well, if you just knew more about managing money, if we had the conversation earlier about separate bank account, if we'd had the conversation earlier about discipline and win goals and loss limits before you started down this road, you might have never gone down the road. But now that you did go down the road and here's these new tools, you might say, oh, okay, now that I have guardrails, maybe I'm not actually off the rails. I just never had rails to start with. And I think there's an element of that for some people could be true. And for some people that will never be true. Like you say, abstinence might be the only way for some folks. It just really depends on your dependency level with some of the warning signs. When I look back at this, some of these warning signs to me are very troublesome, right? And some of the early warning signs are not, right? Yeah, and exactly. Gambling, unlike a substance, there's a, and again, this is just me. It feels like there is this conversation you can have with yourself that you can't have when you're addicted to a substance, where there's a dependency there. Here, I feel out of control. I feel restless. I had the shakes when I'm not at the casino. But there's also this mental component to that I think for a lot of people, we can't get our heads wrapped around that. That's why this is so interesting, actually. And like I said, me as an educator, obviously we have a fun community and we have our talks about gambling. But ultimately, I feel like I'm an educator. And it's like, what's the right message to be sending, right? We can give you all those tools. And I think if you go to battle with all the right tools, you will still fail, right? But are you going to fail miserably, I suppose, right? And are you going to still fight even beyond what the tools can do for you? And I think that's what these warning signs are to me. Is like you may or may not have tools, but you're fighting way over your what do they say? You're punching out of your league or whatever that is. That's kind of where some folks end up with here. When I see the family withdrawal, and I know people from my past that have lost homes and lost marriages and stuff because of this, and they just can't get out of it. And it's like that obviously is a huge warning sign, but the early stages are where I think is the thing, and identifying
Yes.
some of these things.
And it's learning. It's learning. It's making honest assessments. Kind of rational assessments. Stepping back, because it's so easy. It's so seductive. It's easy to kind of get to go in a little bit deeper. To
Hmm.
and that's why again technology can help. If you're being honest with yourself and you step back and you say, you know what, I realize that I'm spending 30 hours a week, playing craps, but now I'm at 40 hours a week, or I was at 10 and now I'm at 30. That's a change. Doesn't necessarily, it may or may not be a warning sign, but
Hmm.
if you're doing the work to monitor things, then you're going to be better equipped to say whether or not that's harmful, because gambling is so subjective and there's not a dose response. All humans are going to react to a certain amount of alcohol, but you may be someone who can put $50,000 on the pass line and not even break a sweat.
Yeah,
Where,
right.
for me, that would just be inconceivable. And there are some people that are gambling at higher levels or lower levels, and that's like you said, that's what makes it so,
Hmm.
because everybody's wired differently for gambling. Alcohol hits everybody the same way within a certain, drugs hit
Right.
everybody the same way within certain parameters. Gambling is incredibly all over the place. And
Yeah. Well, but I think
what
there's a correlation there. There is a
yeah,
correlation there between gambling and substance, because you build a tolerance up with alcohol and with drugs. You need
mhm,
more and more and more to get there. I think gambling can be the same way with money. And you mentioned the big money, and I went, oh God, $50,000. But at some point, it doesn't matter what the dollar is. It's the percentage of what I'm worth. Like if I'm putting
yes,
$100 out there and all I've got is 150, that's the same rush as putting 50K out there when all I've got is 100K, right? You're still feeling the pinch of that thing. But yeah, that's interesting. I think
yeah,
that that need to keep going when you know it's wrong. I think that's the ultimate key, I guess, right? Is that chase. And I think and knowing the rake, and knowing that you can't beat it is part of it. And I think you use the word seduction, which is the perfect word for gambling. There's nothing seductive about drugs or alcohol. This is a very seductive endeavor, because it
yeah.
is, the environment's amazing, and the music and the people and the free drink, all of it, right? It's seductive. That's wow. I got to write that down, because that was a good way of putting it. Because that is, to me, that's the difference. That is one of the big differences. I think when you get early on, you get seduced into it. Later on, you see the money as a tool to get you out of the hole you dug yourself into, and then you start doing the spiral thing. That's what I worry about with people getting into a spiral. But getting sucked into it, I can see very, very easy.
Yeah, but yeah, and it is, and it can. But the good news is that for most people, you never will. And even people
Hmm.
that have all the risk factors, you're young, you're male, you're blah 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 blah. Most of them will still never have a problem. And so shows like this really provide an opportunity for people to hear, and they may not hear it now, but maybe they might remember. And when they have that moment of clarity, they may think back and search on the, okay, I remember this podcast, January da da
Hmm.
da. Oh yeah, right. And so that's the great thing about it, is you never know when you'll reach one of those messages. And in fact, most people who call our helpline say they got the number from or through the gambling industry. So when you see it, you probably just walk past it now. You see the sign at the start of the casino. Well, hopefully that sticks in, and shows like this, you reinforce that. So if it does become an issue, you know where to go, and and it doesn't have to be that one way spiral downwards. But it's a fascinating subject. It really is.
It certainly is. All right, let's go here. I'll put your website back up, and I'll give you the final thoughts and words here. Open floor to speak to the folks that may or may not have issues. But here's your website, and close us out here.
I think I would say it's okay not to be okay. So the goal, if you're gambling, if you're even a heavy gambler, the goal is to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. And by the right reasons, I mean you're gambling for recreation, you're gambling for fun, excitement, entertainment. You're gambling maybe to make money, but those are all positive reasons to gamble. You don't What you want to avoid are negative reasons to gamble. Don't gamble because you're stressed, depressed, because you have to have money. Don't gamble to pay the rent. Make sure you pay the rent and then use discretionary funds. So how and why you gamble is really, really important. And if you feel like that's getting out of balance, gambling, there should be a balanced approach to life. If you feel like your gambling is getting out of balance, there's a lot of easy things you can do to help get back in that balance. And if you find yourself not able to do that, that may be the sign that you're actually having a gambling problem. But the great news is there's always hope and help available. And so, we know the vast majority of people who seek help are able to restore themselves to that balanced way of living. And that's, I think, really, really positive. So everybody who's watching this channel, everybody who's playing craps, know that what you're doing may have a little bit of risk, but that you can mitigate that risk. And that even if it gets out of control, we can help you get back where you wanted to be. So again, thank you, John. Thank you for having the opportunity to talk to you and all your viewers. I hope that we can demystify both gambling addiction. We can normalize this conversation. If you're heavy into craps, that's fine, and be proud of that. But also make sure that you're doing it the right way for the right reasons, and you'll probably avoid some of those traps.
For sure. Well, I think you're right. Having the conversation, I put your number up on the screen every single day. We talk about this all the time, and I think it's important to be open and honest about it. And I like how you say it's okay to be not okay. Yeah. And honestly, I know people that fall into my category too. I don't have a ton of money to gamble with, so I'm in a different world. But having behind me a craps table in my office, right? I have a full-size table in my garage. It kind of scratches the itch. And we've got ways to play now a lot of these games as a community online with each other that there's no money involved. It's just we're playing with each other kind of thing. Network gaming has been great for the video game industry. It actually helps a lot of us out get that need fulfilled without having to go out and spend money on a real online casino or in a live casino. So I think there are ways to scratch it and not have to experience it too. So.
It shifts that risk. It changes it a little bit, and it reduces one of the big factors, and that's great. And there's a lot of stuff that we can do like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think it's all good. I think the education you provide is important, and good money management is responsible gambling, and responsible gambling is good money management. I mean, those are that same Venn diagram, huge overlap.
For sure. All right, well, that's a good place to wrap. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate that, and
my pleasure.
Yeah, this is highly educational. Hopefully that everybody gets something out of it. And remember, 1-800-GAMBLER or ncpggambling.org is the place to be if you have any sort of a warning sign. Thanks again for your time, Keith.
It's confidential, 24/7. So, and that's it. It's confidential. You can ask questions, talk to us, but we're never gonna, that's what it's for. So thanks, John. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks very much. All right, I'm back. That was a great interview. We talked for like half an hour before that and a half an hour after that too. He and I, just a great guy. And I think the organization does yeoman's work. And I think we talked about it. Gambling is a little bit different than substance abuse, just because of the mental component of it. That's just a little different decision making that goes on with it, but there's still the same chemical thing behind it all. So anyway, there it is, guys. Problem gambling. Quick summary here. It is making poor choices when you know better. That's the definition of any addiction, gambling especially. I take it personal. My mission in life is to help you know more, know better, right? I want to keep teaching on all this stuff so that we all have all the tools. We talked about somebody who doesn't have the right tools going into the battle at the casino, destined to fail more miserably, probably, and potentially get sucked into that spiral, that spin cycle we talked about. So there it is, guys. That's the show for today. I want to thank again Keith for his time and helping educate us a little bit, and for heading up such an amazing service, an amazing website. And again, if you, I say it all the time to my students, but I'll say it to you too. If you're feeling something, raise your hand, get help. If you see something, say something. MSP Craps asked in the chat, what do you do if somebody you know or love is having a problem, you raise the question. Hey, I love you. I see something feels like it's going dark. Can we have a conversation about it? Right? Here's a resource that I think could help you. I'd like to walk the journey with you. They can say no, and you have to kind of back off at that point. But you got to raise your hand and at least have that conversation. And I said it in chat too. If it's a friend of yours, that conversation's different. The conversation's put your arm around somebody, walk with them. If it's your spouse, the consequence is different. Right? There's a disconnection potential there. That's very, very, very beefy, very weighty. So just keep all that in mind. Silence is not good in this situation. So speak up for yourself, speak up for others. And with all that said, guys, it's Friday. It's 9:00. I have a job to get to, and I will see you. I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Be safe. Have fun, and yeah, God bless you all. Goodbye, everybody.